and it was written by Friedman Foundation Senior Fellow Brian Gottlob. Mr. Gottlob will be available for anyone who wants to talk to him following this meeting. As previously stated, the goal is twofold. First, let's document the high public costs of dropouts. There's been a great deal of research, as I said, into the public and to the personal and individual costs of dropping out, but there's been precious little research into the costs of the public. As Mr. Gottlob points out in the study, over the past 2 decades, citizens have been supporting higher spending in public schools and a myriad of reform initiatives because of the large private and public benefits associated with these reforms. We believe that when we do something, when we spend money on schooling, we're going to get a better public outcome. Well, the reality is, while an understanding of the public costs and benefits is critical to debates about education reform, researchers rarely document these public costs. The goal of this study is to begin the process of documenting the public costs. These costs are calculated in terms of lost revenue, lost wages, increased incarceration costs, and increased Medicaid costs. The second purpose, as I said, is to examine how an increase in private school enrollment, possibly through a modest school choice program such as the ones being debated in almost every legislature in the country, could reduce the number of dropouts in public schools. Now, all the data comes from the U.S. Census Population Survey and from a number of previously released studies on graduation rates that are all independent and all recognized around the country. Here are the key findings. Of all the students who start high school in North Carolina, only 2/3 graduate, the other 1/3 drop out. Moreover, we found that in the 2005 statewide graduation rate, North Carolina was between 62 and 71% based on independent assessments, rather than the official rate of 80% that was reported by the Department of Education during that year. Now, thankfully, as Daryl has mentioned, the department is recalculating the way it calculates these numbers to be more consistent with the independent estimates. Using independent estimates produced by the EPERC, it's a long title in the back of the study. It's a well-recognized thing done by Education Week. We found that in 2004 and 2005, about 38,135 children left high school before obtaining a high school diploma, far higher than the 21,116 set by the State Department of Education. Now, if you calculate these lost tax revenues, the lost wages from this cohort of dropouts, as well as the increased Medicaid and incarceration costs, we found that the public costs associated with this 1 year's worth of dropouts was a staggering $169 million. 1 year's worth of dropouts, $169 million. If you calculate the cost of these dropouts, this 1 year's worth of dropouts over their expected lifetime of 50 years, you're looking at $8.5 billion. This number of $169 million equates to an average of about $4,437 per dropout. Now, obviously, some dropouts cost less than more, and others cost more than less. But this is an average figure. Moreover, this figure, just so you know, is the highest figure in all the states that we've studied so far, and we've studied 6 states. So North Carolina is the highest in terms of its cost of dropouts. We arrived at this figure of $4,437 by adding the cost of lost revenue of $995 per dropout to the average Medicaid and incarceration cost per dropout, which are $1,496 and $1,946 respectively. What this means basically is the state of North Carolina spends almost as much as it does after a child drops out of school as they do when they're in school. There are significant public costs associated with dropping out. Now, the costs and the benefits of increasing private school enrollment are also present, and the second part of our study is to show how this works. We found that an increase in the private school enrollment of only 3.9% would reduce the number of public school dropouts by between 2,708 and 5,483 students per year, saving the taxpayers of North Carolina about $24 million every year for each class that drops out. Now, it may seem counterintuitive, but the research on this is actually pretty clear. The positive incentives created by increased private school enrollment means that the more children will graduate from North Carolina public schools by an increase in enrollment in North Carolina private schools. Further, using that same method that we use to calculate the cost of dropouts, we calculate the savings to the entire North Carolina's economy from allowing these children or ensuring that these children graduate. These savings range between $12 and $24 million annually. So you could spend it on the front end or you could spend it on the back end. Our belief is that you should increase the enrollment in private schools so that you can spend it on the front end where it belongs. In the end, I think all these data lead to 3 simple conclusions. First, the dropout problem in North Carolina is in epidemic proportions. It's a very significant problem for your state. Second, North Carolina will continue to pay a dear price well into the future for failing to solve this problem. Every year, these children will cost money from this point forward, and it's that simple. Dropping out costs children their hopes and dreams. It costs taxpayers millions of dollars. These students who fail to graduate will cost $4,437 every year for the rest of their life. Third, and finally, a modest increase in private school enrollment and a modest school choice program would lead to significant benefits for the state of North Carolina. More children would graduate from North Carolina public schools as a result of this modest program. Moreover, fewer dropouts means that the state would be able to save precious resources that they could reinvest in the current education system or use on other critically needed services. In the end, the ultimate goal of this study is to provide information to policymakers who are considering education reform issues in their state. Our goal is to, for the first time, begin to show the public cost of education.
We have time for a few questions. Robert, you can start.
I'm not familiar with the group here. Are Parents for Educational Freedom? Is this a spinoff from the Locke Foundation? Tell me about the history of the group.
Yeah, it's 2 years old, a little over 2 years old. A diverse group of leaders. You look at our media kit there, you'll see a board, members of a board, and across the spectrum. You mentioned the Locke Foundation. We have some Republicans that are on our board. We have Democrats. As you see, we have African Americans, white, Latino. You'll be interested. We have several thousand supporters of our organization. And truth be told, we probably have more minority and more Democrat supporters around this whole issue of school choice. The fact that you haven't heard that much about us, one of the things I think is so very important, particularly an organization like ourselves, I think instead of getting before the camera and bringing press to talk to them, I think you have to get out there in the community. And what you see here are some children. These are children here from Mount Zion and Rocky Mount. We have